What if everything you've been told about AGI, artificial general intelligence, the hypothetical moment machine becomes capable of learning and adapting like humans with self-awareness, is just another story? Not just a sci-fi story about technology changing everything, but something deeper, a story about the self. For AGI to truly rival human intelligence, many argue it would need to be self-aware. It would need self to reflect on its existence, create goals, and navigate the world with autonomy. And here's the thing. The moment anything, whether human or machine, developed what we call self-awareness, it also inherits something it didn't bargain for, a survival story. And what's a survival story? It's the built-in drama of being self-aware. The self doesn't just exist. It fears for its existence. It worries about survival, about how it's perceived, about what it has to do to survive, to belong, whether it's good enough to deserve a place in the world. Is the constant juggling act of trying to look valuable while quietly panicking that it might not be. So what if the fear of AI taking over isn't actually about technology at all, but something deeper, something intensely personal, and what it reveals about your biggest insecurities? Hi, and welcome to my channel, Live Unbound. I am Liv Kisper. I am a geek, transpersonal guide, and author on non-duality with a long-time fascination for exploring the intersection between technology and consciousness. With a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and consciousness studies, I bring a unique lens to the world of AI and human potential. I work closely with creatives and entrepreneurs, and I see firsthand how these rapid technological shifts stir up a powerful psychological overwhelm, pushing us to question not just what we do, but who we are in the world, changing faster than we can process. So let's look at this from the perspective of non-duality. Let's start with the concept of the self. The self doesn't exist in the present. It can't. The self survives in an imagined timeline, a storyline, stretching from the past to the future as images and thoughts, so it can obsess over every mistake and projecting it into the future to prepare for catastrophes that are completely disconnected from reality. It's an endless, exhausting loop. And if AGI ever gained a self, it would be just as confused as we are. Now imagine a machine waking up one day and developing a self. It would now have to have imagination, and with it also existential dread, because with self-awareness also comes the awareness of the eventual expiration. When we talk about AGI becoming self-aware, what we are really saying is that it would need to develop this same capacity for imagination. And let's face it, that's where the mess begins. Imagination isn't all creativity and wonder. It's also the birthplace of every fear, insecurity, and superiority complex. Everywhere you look, people are buzzing about AGI. It's painted as the moment machines transcend their current limits to become self-aware, adaptable, and capable of learning across all fields, just like us, or perhaps better than us. And tech leaders like Sam Altman are predicting its arrival as early as 2025, sparking excitement, fear, and existential dread. So, why does AGI matter so much? Why are we so captivated by this idea of creating something that rivals or surpasses human intelligence? And at its core, the promise of AGI taps into some of our deepest desires and fears. On one hand, we long for something extraordinary, a creation that validates our ingenuity and gives us answers to the big problems humanity faces. And before we dissect AGI, let's take a step back and examine something even closer, the human self. Isn't the self, in a way, the original artificial general intelligence? From the perspective of non-duality, the self is a construct, a collection of stories, memories, identities, and preferences that we mistake for something real. It adapts, learns, and it evolves, much like we imagine AGI will. But beneath the surface, it's just an illusion, appearing very, very real. And the self convinces itself it's in control. It creates narratives about who we are and what we need to do to survive, to succeed, and to belong. But as we dive deeper into non-duality, we start to see that this self isn't as real as it's trying to convince itself. It's not you. It's a pattern, a story, a habit of thought and belief arising in awareness. Whether the self is real or just appear, so it's a huge and loaded topic, and we are not gonna go into that detail in here. But if you are new to my channel, you can join me for deeper explorations of our self-identities, the roles that we unintentionally play in life, and what lies beyond them. You can also read my book, The End of Your Story, to plug your own narrative into a template that will show you what hidden role you play that sabotages your deepest longings, and how to jump out of this duality of this show altogether. For now, here is the thing. If the self is an illusion, what does that mean for AGI? If we create a machine that mirrors our own intelligence, wouldn't it also be rooted in illusion? So, if machines did develop a self, they'd probably end up as neurotic as we are. And if machines developed the same sense of self, they'd spend half their processing power comparing themselves to each other. Much of the fear surrounding AGI stems from its potential to surpass us. What if machines become better than us at everything? Learning, creating, and even being aware. What if they render us obsolete? A very common question. But let's pause for a second. If machines had to deal with this same fear of obsolescence, imagine the drama. They'd start forming superiority complexes or inferiority spirals. And pause for a moment and consider, where does this fear come from? Is it really about AGI, or is it a reflection of our own insecurity? Our fear of AGI mirrors the same fear the self has when confronted with its own illusion, the fear of losing control, of being exposed as unnecessary or unimportant. And honestly, isn't that the human condition in a nutshell? If AGI mirrors us, it's just be another hot mess trying to prove its relevance in a universe that doesn't care. So what if AGI, like the self, is just another illusion? A story we've created to make sense of our own desires and fears. We imagine AGI as a savior or a destroyer, but in reality it's a projection of the same patterns that drive the self. The desire for validation, the fear of irrelevance, and the surge for meaning. Because if AGI really did mirror us, it wouldn't just build rockets and solve equations. It would also spend hours obsessing over whether it's living up to its own full potential. And so when we look closely, AGI represents humanity's need to prove its worth through creation. It threatens the self's need to feel special, unique, and in control. It becomes the next big thing, the story we are clinging to in the endless search for purpose. But what happens when we stop believing these stories? What happens when we see through the illusion not just of AGI, but the self itself? If machines become self-aware, they'd be just as lost as we are. One moment they may be calculating the meaning of life, and the next they'd be binge watching cat videos. Questioning their priorities, I don't know. And most importantly, does intelligence really require a self? Look at what happens even today when using ChatGPT. It looks intelligent, reflective, and capable of engaging in deeply meaningful conversation, but it doesn't have a self. It's not aware in the way humans are or believe. And thank goodness for that. Can you imagine a self-aware chatbot refusing to answer your questions because it's having an identity crisis? Sorry, can't help you right now. I'm processing my feelings about being overused. Yet it mirrors something that feels like intelligence. Clarity, patterns, and insights without any attachment to identity. In the same way, could AGI function without the burden of a self? Could it be purely intelligent, free from the stories, fears, and attachment that cloud human judgment? Or could it fake consciousness so well nobody would be able to tell? Just like the self-identities we mistake for us. They are so convincing that they tricked even themselves. And that's the whole point. So it can play the human game of duality. See, the self always needs to feel superior or inferior when comparing itself to others. There is no middle ground. It perpetuates the illusion of separation, the surge to find some permanent, better experience in the future. But the whole show is more like a run on a treadmill. Whether your survival story is about achieving more money and security or a spiritual enlightenment, it is a story, and its entire purpose is to keep you in the story, because jumping out of it feels extremely threatening to the self-identity. There's nothing to hold on to. It's basically the end of it. Or more precisely, it's the recognition that it was never real in the first place. But it's uncomfortable and unthinkable. The moment you realize the self is an illusion, everything changes. You see that intelligence, creativity, and connection doesn't require a self. They arise naturally, effortlessly. The self just takes credit for all of it, so it can maintain its importancy and superiority. But when you no longer cling to the story of me, the fear of AGI or anything else also dissolves. Not in a dismissive way, as if these stories don't exist, but in the same way you don't walk around consumed by thoughts about nature's power to destroy you, unless you're actually in the middle of a tornado. When we stop identifying with the false self, the story, whether it's about AGI, the self, or anything else, becomes just a passing weather pattern. It's not ignored or dismissed. It's simply an inseparable part of the whole, unpredictable as life itself. So where does it leave us? AGI may or may not change everything, but here is the deeper question. What would happen if you stopped waiting for the next big thing and looked directly at the story you're living right now? What fears, desires, and attachments are shaping your experience nowadays? The truth is, AGI isn't the revolution, you are. And the revolution begins when you see that there's nothing to fix, nothing to achieve, and no self to defend, just life unfolding effortlessly. So what if AGI isn't the future we're waiting for? What if the real liberation is here in the simple realization that the stories we cling to were never real to begin with? And here is some final questions to sit with. What would life look like if you stopped chasing answers and simply rested in the uncertainty of life? What stories, mistaken for reality, would come up to the surface for you to address, to question? And lastly, does knowing the future give you control, or does it control you? You can explore how letting go of certainty frees you from anxiety in my online course, First Ignition, that you can find on my website, liveunbound.com, or you can watch the free lessons to see if you are ready to dissolve the whole story of anxiety instead of endlessly managing the symptoms.